Ladies and gentlemen, India and Canada's diplomatic relations have hit rock bottom. But what's appalling is Canada's peddling of a ridiculous theory in its mission to defend slain Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. For example, the Canadian police's laughable narrative is that Indian diplomats in Canada collect intelligence on alleged Sikh separatists, which is then passed on to India's external spy agency, which identifies the targets and later gives a hit list to Bishnoi gang to eliminate them. I mean, how bizarre is this? Soon after, India made it clear that enough is enough and expelled 6 Canadian diplomats. Trudeau said that the government of India has made a fundamental error, but India gave it right back. Government sources are now telling Times Now that Canada's approach since the beginning has been to make vague accusations and put the burden of denial on the Indian government. But first, listen in to what Trudeau and his corps have had to say.
Law enforcement and intelligence officials began pursuing credible allegations that agents of the Government of India were directly involved in the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, on Canadian soil. We responded. CMP Commissioner stated earlier, they have clear and compelling evidence that agents of the Government of India have engaged in and continue to engage in activities that pose a significant threat to public safety.
What we've seen is there's specific targeting of pro-Khalistan elements in Canada, or members of the pro-Khalistan movement. What we've seen is from an RCMP perspective, is the use of organized crime elements. And I will say and it's been publicly attributed and claimed by one organized crime group in particular, which is the Bishnoi group. So that's what we're seeing here in Canada. And we believe that that group is connected to agents of the Government of India.
You're watching the News Hour at 9, debate number 2 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Joining the debate tonight, Peter MacKay, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada. Also joining me this evening, Gary Keller, former advisor to former Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Canada. Also joining me this evening, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the ORF. Also joining him is Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Senior Fellow at the IPCS. My first question goes to Mr. Peter MacKay. Mr. Peter MacKay, as a former Foreign Affairs Minister, how do you assess the current diplomatic crisis between India and Canada, especially because Prime Minister Trudeau says credible allegations against Indian agents exist? Do you think when he says this, there should be evidence on the table?
Well, thank you, Navika, and that is perhaps the most prudent question you could ask. In addition to being in politics, I was a prosecutor for many years in Canada, and you need more than credible allegations even to get a warrant to go and search a person's home or to seize evidence. Credible allegations do not amount to proof beyond a reasonable doubt or even reasonable and probable grounds, which is the basic criteria that police have to meet. And so not only is that a low bar that he has set, he has then not even, our Prime Minister, laid out what the evidence is. The RCMP Commissioner yesterday in a press conference spoke in broad terms about what these allegations were, as you've described them. And yet there is, at least to my knowledge, no hard evidence that has been put forward. Perhaps it's been shared with the Indian government, but the pushback has been to call these allegations preposterous, ridiculous, and other adjectives that strongly denounce what the Prime Minister has said. So it is beyond unfortunate that we find ourselves in this diplomatic place, but I'm a person who likes to adhere to the rule of law, and I know that that is the case in India as well. We come from many of the same judicial traditions. And so we have to find a way back to these important trade relations, these important diplomatic relationships. This has become extremely personal, it would seem, between the Prime Minister of Canada and the Prime Minister of India. And that is not where we need to be at a time like this, when we need friends in the world, quite frankly.
Well, very well said. But Mr. Gary Keller, given your extensive experience in government under Prime Minister Harper, how do you view the current diplomatic tensions between India and Canada? Do you think, this break that has come in is advisable with the kind of information that is currently available in public domain? And this kind of a snapping of relations in this manner, do you think, it's a step too far?
Well, it's a great question. And look, the relationship between our two countries has been cool to cold ever since Prime Minister Trudeau's visit to India back in 2018, and it has not warmed up since then. Obviously, the allegations that the Prime Minister made in the House of Commons last fall about Indian involvement in the assassination of Nijjar, the way it was handled, there was a lot of criticism in Canada for that was handled, and that obviously had a setback. At the same time, there was a very interesting article in the Washington Post yesterday, which detailed Canadian efforts to meet with Indian officials, including the National Security Advisor, a 5-hour meeting in Singapore over the weekend on Saturday, where Canada says it provided credible allegations and information to Indian authorities, including your National Security Advisor. Now, I suspect that in the coming days, we're going to continue to have this back and forth about who said what to whom, and Canada has taken action when what they believe is the right thing to do to expel Indian diplomats. It's a very serious action. Anytime you expel any country's diplomats, it's a highly serious action. But the RCMP and the government believe that they have the evidence. They believe that they have presented that evidence. And I think it's also interesting to note that all three political parties in Canada have said, look, if there is credible evidence that India has been involved in activities, the government of Canada has to take activity to protect its citizens no matter what.
So let me ask you, Mr. Keller, the question that is being debated right here in India is Mr. Trudeau's apparent reliance on pro-Khalistan elements like Jagmeet Singh, which he needs for his political existence, so to speak. Do you think that is behind this entire muscular position that the Canadian Prime Minister has taken? And do you think politics in foreign and diplomatic relations in this manner is ill-advised and short-term vision?
Well, look, two things can be true. Certainly, Canada has had a problem with Khalistani activity based in Canada, and there's been lots of accusations, incredible accusations levied against actors in Canada, and this is a problem. Everyone acknowledges in Canada that this is a problem. At the same time, if there is credible evidence that has been presented, then the government of India has to take action on this. Look, there has been accusations by all sorts of people. The Prime Minister and the government of Canada has pursued a vote-based authority. In fact, a former leader of the New Democratic Party last week, Mr. Thomas Mulcair, said that the current Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, had told him she had a foreign policy was based simply on the makeup of her constituency in north end of Montreal. So that accusation has been levied, and people will continue to make that accusation here. But at the same time, as I say, Canada can have a problem with Khalistani separatists, and we need to take action against that. But there can also be credible evidence, which it appears that the government of Canada has provided to the Indian government.
Well, so let me take this question to Abhijit Iyer Mitra. And Abhijit Iyer Mitra, Khalistan problem does exist for Canada, but if there is credible information given to the Indians, well, in that sense, we're even working with the United States of America. And just today, a team of Indians is landing in D.C. To look at the allegations on Satwant Singh Pannu. Now, if we can work with America, where is the problem in working and carrying out investigations based on credible information provided by Canada? Unless, of course, the rules of the game have been different in both cases.
No, they haven't, Navika. See, Americans adopted an extremely professional approach to this. And, it was the kind of professionalism we expected from the Harper government, which is sadly lacking with this sort of amateurish pyromaniac government that we have in Canada today. Let me tell you what the Americans did. They put out an indictment where everything was clearly listed out. All the pieces of evidence were listed out. It was given to India. We accepted it immediately. There's a guy already in jail who's been sacked from government services, and Indian authorities are today in DC briefing the government about it. What did Justin Trudeau do? First, he made credible allegations. What is a credible allegation? There is either allegations or there's credible evidence. There's no such thing as a credible allegation. Anyway, he comes up with credible allegations just before the Manitoba state elections. And mind you, we're now headed in the next 2 weeks for elections in British Columbia, in New Brunswick, in Saskatchewan, and one other province that I forget. He's facing a leadership coup at the moment. He's facing an inquiry on foreign interference, especially Chinese, to his party and his colleagues at the moment. A lot of things don't add up here. But overall, what's lacking in the Canadian approach is professionalism. I'm coming from a briefing on that so-called 5-hour meeting that was held in Singapore. 90% of what was discussed was Indian diplomats gathering information in Canada, which is incidentally in their job description. Oh my God, what a great crime. The second part of it was telling a lot of these organized criminals, bro, we've seen what you're doing. If you do this, you'll probably get arrested in India. We know who your dealers in India are. You're going to get arrested. That's kind of the job of a diplomat to do, right? We won't give you a visa if you come in. That's, again, the prerogative of a diplomat to do. 10% of it, out of that entire 5 hours, which apparently Doval felt was wasted, all of 15 to 20 minutes was spent on this case. And apparently what was discussed in this case was an organized crime angle, which is what we have been saying since day one. We keep talking up Khalistan because we think it sounds more serious. The fact is, Khalistan, there is no Khalistan movement. It's a sort of a political slogan given to an organized crime cartel, which then uses it to gain political asylum and political privileges in Canada. And what was done here was they repeated what we told them, that it was an organized crime racket. And they asked for the link. We asked for the link. Where does Lawrence Bishnoi connect up with the Indian government? And you know what the link was, Navika? Apparently, we issued them with passports. Apparently, the government issued them with certificates. Are you kidding me?
Well,
and this, mind you, Navika, when every tenet of the Brandenburg principle of what constitutes incitement, a specific target against a specific threat, is being violated in Canada every single day. You saw what was done to the effigy of the High Commissioner. A bunch of organized criminals taking out their guns and shooting at his face and then burning him and certain other embassy officials' effigy. If that isn't a violation of the Brandenburg principle, I don't know what is.
So, Mr. Peter MacKay, while Canada recognizes that they have a Khalistani problem, the link that they're talking about is issuing of passports. If that is the kind of information that was shared over the weekend with the National Security Advisor of India, what is this credible allegation that we are talking about?
Well, I'm yet to hear anything that would constitute the type of action that was taken, that is designating Indian officials, including your High Commissioner, as persona non grata. What I find quite bizarre, frankly, is that if there was credible evidence, as was suggested by the professor, that warrants wouldn't have been issued and arrests would have been made, not sending people home. There also is, of course, this huge gulf between the way America has handled its cases and its concerns and the way that Canada has acted. And the result being, as you've described it here today, that India has cooperated with America, has sent officials to America to further share information, to get to the bottom of what is crime. I find the word organized crime a bit of an oxymoron, but there it is. It's criminal activity on our sovereign soil. we need the support, the cooperation, and in some cases the evidence and the individuals in order for there to be convictions and people held to account. And that is the same in your country as it is in ours. And so I'm very troubled by the way this has unfolded. I don't know whether there has been a partisan political angle to it. I certainly hope not. There are things that really should be beyond the party politics when it comes to human life, when it comes to the protection of national interests. And I come back to the very real issue of the fact that Canada and India need each other. We need to get along. We need to cooperate. We need our leaders to sort this out in a way that is in the best interest and, most importantly, in the security interests of our own citizens. We can't hide behind these type of allegations without being able to back it up, without being able to turn it over to the police, to security forces, and ultimately have a judicial finding in the matter. And that's where we seem to have gone off the track.
Well, very well said, Sushant Sareen. Where do we go from here? Is this only about elections, or can we see beyond elections some common ground, or are we looking at an irretrievable situation? Because that will have bearing on people, because a lot of Indians live in Canada, maybe not vice versa, but certainly a lot of Indians living in Canada. How do you see this situation developing?
Navika, we might be bothered about Indians living in Canada. I don't know if the Canadians are bothered about people who live in Canada. After all, 350 of them were killed in a terrorist act. And what did the Canadians do about it? They let all the perpetrators of that attack go scot-free. In fact, they have turned a blind eye to the eulogizing of the murderers. So that is what Canada has done. Secondly, I think Justin Trudeau has very successfully poisoned the well. And I don't see an easy way out of this crisis. I think relations are only going to get worse before they get any better. I would strongly recommend to the government of India that, this free ride which many of the Canadians have had, that at one level you have a government which, as Abhijit describes, is led by a pyromaniac. And at another level, you have a very fruitful, trade relationship going on. We've just a couple of weeks back, we issued visas to people for coming for trade delegations. There are new trade delegations planning to come out here. Why the hell do we need to do all that? There are consulates operating in Chandigarh, for example, the consulate in Chandigarh, which, according to reports in the Indian press, I don't take Washington Post seriously. I take Indian press far more seriously. And the Indian press has reported that these are people who have been involved in incitement, who have been involved in instigating these people. This is also the consulate from where a criminal like Nijjar is given a visa. What is the kind of vetting which the so-called famed Five Eyes do when it comes to these kind of criminals? Secondly, all the allegations which have been heard, Navika, India has given more than adequate evidence to the Canadians to act against these guys. What have the Canadians done about it? Precious little. When this fellow Sidhu Moosewala, the singer, was killed, the claim for his killing came from the Lawrence Bishnoi gang's members based in Canada. And now the Canadians are telling us that Lawrence Bishnoi is an Indian agent. Lawrence Bishnoi, who's in an Indian jail, is supposed to be an Indian agent. Frankly, somebody's been watching too much Bollywood masala films in Canada and then coming out, maybe it's the RCMP guys. I don't know who it is who's watching all of that, but coming out with these bizarre theories. So I think this well has been well and truly poisoned. Even if it might be good for Canada if the current bunch loses the election and, maybe the Conservatives were to come in. But I don't see how the Conservatives are going to do anything much more different. After all, we see the Conservative leader also pander to some of this Khalistani element. We see he is going to some of the gurdwaras who are associated with some of these murderers, where pictures of the perpetrators of the Air India bombing are eulogized.
Absolutely. Red lines have been crossed. The fact of the matter is, clearly, There is a huge problem, a huge chasm that actually builds up right here. How is it going to be bridged? Well, we'll have to wait and watch. But for now, Canada clearly non grata, persona non grata right here in India, and relationships between the two countries nosedive to a new nadir. How are we going to emerge from this when we can work with the United States? Why can't we work with Canada? Are they operating on rules that are clearly a joke in the international fora? That's the question that we are asking tonight. We leave it at that. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on the News Hour.